إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الله به الغمة وأزال به الظلمة وتركنا على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك والصلاة والسلام عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. My respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I don't know if anyone is here, so you let me know. I'm not seeing anyone yet, so please you can all join me while we navigate through how to help our kids overcome the lack of motivation and lack of interest in the learning of the Quran and also its memorization. You know, I think this topic is a very important one that we have to talk about, being that, you know, based on my own years of experience teaching kids Quran, alhamdulillah. My name is Muhammad Amin, and I've completed my Quran memorization in 2011 from Nigeria. So I'm originally from Nigeria, but I've been in the US, in North America, for more than 6 years now, with my family, with my wife, who also completed our own memorization as well around that time, or even before mine as well. So, you know, we set out, you know, in the mission to help kids, especially the kids living, you know, across the globe, who do not have access to, you know, like a well-structured Islamic studies curriculum or a well-structured Islamic school. And, you know, since then we've been helping a lot of families and, you know, helping a lot of kids become Quran readers, you know, fluent Quran readers. And the topic we want to discuss today, you know, I want to make the meeting a brief one, is the role of the environment in the Quran learning for children. As we all know, that Al-Quran Al-Kareem is the book of Allah and the gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to mankind. It's like, you know, like our manual of life. And as we adults, most of us, majority of us have, you know, gone through, you know, like learning the Quran, you know, in one way or the other. But majority of the people are not well versed, you know, in the recitation of the Quran, in terms of avoiding the two major types of mistakes in the Quran, you know, the minor mistakes or the major ones. So the minor mistakes are called al-lahn al-khafi, right, which is, you know, the hidden mistakes, the mistakes that will not definitely change the meaning of the Quran or change the context of the ayah, right? But lahn al-jali is called the major mistake, or we'll call the obvious mistakes. These kind of mistakes change the meaning of the Quranic verses and words. And as such, no one who is reciting the Quran would want to, you know, fall into this kind of mistakes. So how do we now help our kids, you know, overcome these kind of mistakes? You know, the first thing is help them learn how to recite the Quran. And whenever children learn to recite the Quran, you know, the Quran, you know, is revealed in Arabic language, right? The Quran is revealed in Arabic language, and people who would want to learn the Quran would have to, you know, learn how to read, you know, the Arabic text. So especially for kids who, you know, are not native Arabic speakers, this becomes a challenge. And it's not just for learning Arabic alone, but whenever it comes to learning a second language, you know, like even people trying to learn French or people learning how to speak or write in German, or how to read in German, or any kind of secondary language that's not your own native language, it's somehow harder to learn. But even for those who are native Arabic speakers, it's hard, right? Sometimes to learn the Tajweed. You've seen a lot of people who are even Arabs that cannot perfectly recite the Quran, fluently well with Tajweed and all the ahkam, in there. It's not because, maybe they are weak or that. It's the Quran has its own mu'jiza. The Quran is not just some, a book anyone can just pick and read without studying it or without learning it, because the Quran, is a book, is a message that you can't just sit on your own and say you want to learn it. You have to learn it from someone. You have to learn it from, someone who's certified to teach you. And that's why, it's kind of become a tradition in the field of, among the scholars of Quran, the Qur'an, that to give ijazah to people who already passed through the rigor of being perfect in their recitation of the Quran. So doing this is a very tedious task for adults, let alone the kids. So that's why we have a lot of kids, some of them engaging in learning of the Quran, but they fall into the syndrome of lack of motivation or lack of interest in the recitation of the Quran classes, or they drop out of the Quran program or whatever Quran classes that it's been organized for them. So there are three factors that must be present before a kid or someone can learn a second language or can learn perfectly, especially for kids. If you guys have watched some of some of my recordings in this group, you will have seen that I mentioned those three factors. So there are three factors that could determine the success of a child to successfully learn Quran reading in Arabic or memorization. So the first factor is what we call the environment of the kid. So the environment where the child is learning the Arabic language or learning how to read the Quran is so well structured or not adequate. There's gonna be a lot of resentment. There's gonna be a lot of the kid will start developing lack of interest. Those three factors must be present, so they have to work hand in hand. So the first factor, we call them the three trifecta. So the first factor is the environment where the child is learning the Quran. So what kind of environment do the children need to be able to avoid overcome lack of motivation or lack of interest? And the second factor is the habits, the habits that the kid was learning the Quran. I find out that a lot of people, they want the kid to learn the Quran, but the kind of habits the parents puts in place for the child or for the kid to concentrate in learning the Quran Arabic, they don't give the right environment. Unlike when the kid or the child is going to the normal school, the parents will have to wake up the child at 6 a.m. or 6 whatever, 7 a.m. and get them ready for school. They get them ready and make them do their homework. They're gonna send them homework, and the parents will have the kids done the homework. The parents will not want their child found wanting, not doing what they should do or they should have been doing in school. So they make sure they do what is required of them. People don't put this same kind of rigor or this same kind of attention to Quran Arabic learning, and think it's something that's not that important. And before you know it, the kid is gonna develop a lot of resistance and not want to learn anymore, right? And the third factor is the strategy, right? So whenever you teach kids or you teach any subject, right, you have to have a strategy, a set of curriculum or a set of ways that you've been, that's been proven, that's been consistently perfect, right? Will I say that's been consistently, producing results, like, that you've used to teach kids, who are not, fluent in Arabic, Quran Arabic reading, to those who are fluent. So today we're going to be talking about the environment and what role the environment plays in helping the kid avoid lack of motivation in Quran learning. So the environment that's really very suitable for a kid or for a child to learn Arabic, is a group environment. The group environment, not too much members of the group, like, normally around 5 maximum, people or kids in the group. right? So the reason for selecting a group environment is that, kids go to school, like, and they always love going to school. Why do they love going to school? We don't ask that same question, right? Because they love going to school because they're gonna meet their colleagues, right? They're gonna meet their peer groups, their age mates or their friends at school. Sometimes it might not even just be, the willingness to go learn at school, but that play, that environment that they see people who belong to the same, cater, or who belongs to the same age as them. So they feel that kind of enthusiasm to go to school all the day, all the time, right? And they're only excited whenever it's Monday. So we are not putting the same kind of environment in place when it has to come to learning the Quran. So a lot of parents would want their kids to learn, one-on-one with a tutor. And the thing is that, like, if a child is learning with an adult, right, it's just an adult learning, especially if the adult is not their parents, there's this kind of, superiority complex, right? Because the child will always think, oh, this adult is way much on top, higher above me. And, he's teaching me all this stuff, which I don't know, right? And so the child is going to think, oh, probably because that person is an adult, so, you should have known him, right? But I'm just a kid, I'm not really interested in this, because it's so hard to learn. So the opposite is going to be the case whenever the child is within his own age group. So when he's within his own age group, so that's another, challenge. So you don't put kids, that 5 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old in the same class, and you expect them to perform, perfectly. So they have different comprehension level, right? And they have different level, of their maybe like, pre-Arabic reading skills that they have. So we have to make sure that in that group, where you have those kids, you have to have, this applies to even if you are trying to learn and teach the Quran to the kids, as a part of the family or all that. So it's very good for them to have, like, peer groups, people of the same age. If you don't find them, around you, try to find them online so that they can learn together, so they can cheer up each other. They can, so because the reason is that once they are of the same age group, right? If they are of the same age group, like, so if a child is trying to learn how to pronounce, let's say, kha, or trying to learn how to pronounce a joined word of the Quran. So if they are within the same group, the same age group, and he sees one of, the lab mate or the classmate able to pronounce that alphabet or trying to pronounce that word, so he feels that courage himself, right? The other child, the other kids in the group feel they have that courage. They develop that courage. Oh, this guy is able to pronounce it, so I can also do it as well. That's where the encouragement and that the interest and the motivation setting, right? Because there's what we call the transfer of skills, among all the kids. So they feel that, okay, it's not just that because this teacher is an adult is able to understand this, but other kids like me also can also pronounce the same thing like I do, like the teacher does. So that definitely they can also do it. So when I made mention of the the essence of the group environments in learning new language, so you make sure I'm going to talk later on about some of the challenges of the group environment and what solutions could be put in place to solve some of the minor challenges that you might face in a group learning environment. So firstly, the group environment must be defined, right? It shouldn't be an unlimited number of kids in a group. So I think a maximum of 5 for kids below 10 years old, or for kids below around 5 to 8 years old. That's kind of like the optimum number of kids that could could work effectively or efficiently in a group, right? Not more than 5, right? For kids in elementary or kindergarten. So the age group must be similar. If it's different, maybe like 1 or 2 years above or below each other, one another. So the age group must be very similar whenever it's in a group environment, and also they must have the same level of of parallel Quran reading skills. They must be of the same level, because if you have a child that's way above the rest of the class, so the rest of the class will look inferior to that child, and they feel like, oh, we can't know this, right? It's only this child that can know whatever the teacher is asking, right? So you don't want to put kids that are way above the skill level of the rest of the child. You don't want to put him in the same group as the rest of the kids in there, right? So you have to make sure you balance up the age. You make sure it's of similar age, they have similar ages, and you make sure that they have similar skill level, so that you'll be able to they'll be able to transfer the skill set, and they have that kind of confidence. Because if a child is way above the rest of them, they feel, oh, probably this child has already had some superpowers or some other skills that he's already learned, But if they're of the same age group, the same level, and they're all struggling together, like for instance, imagine, you want to climb the mountain Everest, right? If you want to do it, as a solo person, right, do it on your own, you're going to feel that kind of lack of motivation, right? But rather, when you have a lot of people, maybe like a group of 5, or that motivation setting, right? You have that courage that, yeah, we're going to get to the top of the mountain, right? So that's the key. Unlike when it's just you alone, there's gonna be a lot of resentment. There's gonna be a lot of lack of interest to continue with the with the expedition, right? So you have to make sure kids of the same group, of the same age group, the same level, aiming to achieve the same goal. Because the goal of all the kids is to be able to learn how to properly recite the Quran, right? So they are aiming to the same goal, and we are all aiming them to the same level of comprehension, or the same level of fluency, right? So this also applies to memorizing the Quran as well. This also applies to memorizing the Quran as well. So the environment is a very key environment. So sometimes, that's very normal. In a group, you might have, 1 or 2 kids that's not going along with the rest of the kids, right? So that's where, we call it, office hours. You have, there should be like a kind of, a very little bit of one-on-one session with the kids that are struggling. So how do you even know the kid is struggling? So for instance, after each class, you give them homework, you give them assignment or exercise to do on their own, right? So if they all turn in the homework and you see, oh, okay, this one is not getting it right, so that's where you have to kind of go and get that child that's lacking behind and try to, catch him up to the rest of the group, right? So you set up maybe like a few 20-30 minutes one-on-one to kind of look into the challenges of that child and try to kind of catch the child up with the rest of the group, right? So that's how to avoid the gaps or any kind of pitfalls that might be in a group in a group class. And so the environment is very critical, like it's very essential to the success of a child in learning Quran reading or even any other language, right? So if you want to do this as a parent, so it's advisable, like, if you want to it's advisable if a parent wants to teach a child the Quran, you should make sure that you also have the ijazah on your own. You make sure that you are certified, to teach the child yourself. Because if you're not certified to teach the child yourself, then you're going to teach the child wrong stuff, right? And it's very hard to unlearn whatever's been learned, right? That's one thing we should all know. Whenever you teach a child the wrong stuff, it's hard for you to get it back, to take out that stuff that's been taught wrongly, right? So a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I know Arabic, right? Or I can teach my child the Quran. No, that's not how it's done, right? You must be certified and, confirm that you already also know how to pronounce the alphabet. You have the makharij. So anyone today can just, everyone, but in as much you can just easily read the Quran, trying to teach the kids the correct pronunciation, the correct, makharij, the correct Tajweed rules is something essential that we have to look into, right? It shouldn't be just anyone or everybody can teach kids Quran. And another challenge is like, when the kids are learning from a certified tutor and they're reading at home, their parents might be like, oh, what are you reading? You're reading something wrong, right? And if there's those kind of contradiction, the kids are going to be like, they get confused, like, oh, my teacher is teaching me something and, the parents is saying something else, right? So we have to be very careful in terms of not trying to confuse the kids, and not trying to teach them wrong stuff, right? So we have to create a good environment and create that kind of motivation in them, which the group environment is going to create to them. And if they are, like a teacher or a parent who is teaching a group of kids, one thing they have to look into is that they give the kids homework, or they have to give them homework. That's the habit, right? We're going to talk about the habit later on. And the habit has its own usefulness in trying to help the kids, continue to learning and perfectly learn Quran recitation, right? But the environment is so very crucial because it determines if the kid is going to continue learning or not. And if a child is not having the right environment, then the child is going to lack motivation or interest in continuing learning, right? So it's going to lack the interest, it's going to lack the motivation. So this is, one thing I think we have to put in mind, right? So like, you don't want to just teaching kids, like put them in a group and just leave them, right? Or put them, with the teacher and just leave them and think that they're going to, be successful. No, that's not how it works, right? So I gave the analogy of kids going to school. Like, they all like going to school because they all see their classmates, they're of the same age group. So we see in many schools these days, right? So they ask the kids to resume, like they have kids in kindergarten, right? they make sure they are of the same age group, like kids starting 5 years old. So that's how it's designed in schools. But many of us, like Muslims, we think, oh, because we don't take our Quran learning so very important, right? So we don't think that we should have the same system that's been put in place in schools, right, to learn the Quran. So all these kids that are learning different subjects in schools, like they have a goal, right? And they are of the same age most of the time, right? So 5 years old kids are all in kindergarten and they learn the same thing, they are of the same level of understanding, So that's how, and a Quran learning environment should be as well. Like, put them in the same age group and don't put them in isolation. Kids don't like learning in isolation, and the teacher who is teaching them also must be aware of the characteristics of kids so that they know how to handle them, right? So a group environment is a very good environment for kids to learn Quran. So that's, the summary of what I just said is that a group, a selected group environment of kids is a very good environment to overcome lack of motivation, to overcome lack of interest, and also it's even going to, allow, a much faster, speed for the kids to learn the Quran. So instead of kids learning Quran for 5 years, like there are many reasons why that happened. Maybe you have kids, uncountable numbers of kids in a group, learning together. There's no way the teacher can assess any child who's having some gaps or having some roadblocks in the learning process. So you have to be very selective in the numbers of the students you put in the group, especially for kids, right? No more than 5 students in a group, right? So that you can have deep focus on them and try to identify those who are falling behind, right? And you must make sure that they are of the same level, they are of the same age group. And there are many other things that a group learning has, like you can have like little competition among the student, and also whenever anyone is able to do something right, you reward them. It doesn't have to be with money, but you can just, let's give a shout out to Muhammad today because he's able to read the Quran, he's able to read this verse, give a shout out to him, right? And that's going to bring that kind of excitement to that child as well, because he feels, oh yeah, I'm being appreciated, I'm able to do this, right? So other kids also want to do the same thing, right? They want to have the same kind of appreciation from the teacher as well. So that it's only possible in a group environment, which you can have in a one-on-one class environment. So some people have questions like, why do we think a one-on-one environment is not good? I'm not saying a one-on-one environment is not good, but a one-on-one environment is not really efficient for kids, right? They are not really efficient for kids learning, and that's why you see a lot of kids developing lack of interest. And even if kids are in a group learning environment, if the teacher is not well knowledge about how to handle those kind of environment, try to engage all the kids, there might be some loopholes as well. So as a result of that, I encourage parents, to reach out to teachers that can do that, teach kids efficiently, and make sure we teach kids, if we have the knowledge of the Quran reading ourselves. Don't dabble into teaching your kids if you're not really well qualified yourself to teach the kids Quran. The way a lot of us read the Quran or learn the Quran, it's not the way it should have been learned, right? So if you've taught the kid in a wrong way, it's hard for them to unlearn it, right? So that's why if you teach them wrongly, when they get to a teacher that's gonna teach them correctly, it becomes hard for them to to unlearn whatever they've learned earlier. So this is just gonna be the end of my talk. So I would welcome questions from everyone here. I really like everyone to contribute. Can I hear? You can drop your question in the chat below. You can drop your question in the chat if you have questions on this topic. Is there anyone with questions there? I can check the question in the chat. Can you send the question to the chat? وَيَاكُمْ Sister Ruqayya, Jazakumullah khair. Yeah, so I really think that you really benefit from this class, from this session. So this is just gonna be the beginning of trying to explain the factors that that helps kids, that motivate them to to develop interest in learning Quran. So the first factor is the environment, and the second factor is the habits, or we call it the standards. There should be a well acceptable standard, like we all have in schools. Like the kids go to schools, they have those standards, they have those habits, they have those things that they are required to do, which helps them in the learning process. So we have to have that as well whenever we teach our kids Quran, right? And also the strategy. So I urge everyone in this group who are just joining today, you can go to the guide section of this group, and there's a guide that I just wrote about how parents can help their kids become fluent Quran readers. So go through the guide. There's a lot of tips on how, if you are a certified tutor, how you can help the kids learn Quran reading right at home, or how you should expect a classroom environment if they are learning with someone, or they are you're planning to learn the kid Quran with the teacher. You should want to ask for those kind of environments. You should want to ask for those kind of habits. Are they present, right? You should want to ask for those kind of strategies that will help the kids learn the Quran from being a lay person that doesn't know how to read the Arabic alphabet to someone who can fluently read the Quran with Tajweed. Actually, in Mari Academy, we do have that program currently with kids. We enroll kids from 5 to like 10 years old. In our, we call it the Accelerated Quran Reading Program. So where we teach kids. So we make it, we implement all those factors. We implement, the environment factor. We implement the standards, right? The habits. We also implement, the strategies, right? So we make sure all those factors are intact and and present whenever we teach the kids. I mean, anyone interested in that program can can reach out to us. I mean, but if parents can really teach their kids themselves, that's really good, because the kids are always very used to the parent. But if the parents, maybe for reasons, sorry, let me take some water. So if the parents are, maybe not certified themselves, or they don't have time, they are certified, or they are also, good in teaching Quran, but they are not chanced, so that's when, a class environment, should be encouraged, right? So inshallah, you can look forward to some of my other videos about the benefit of learning Quran to our kids. Why is it important to make sure our kids learn Quran, and the benefit that's going to make to them in their life, and also to ourselves as well as parents, raising the kids. There's a lot of benefits to gain from having the kid learn how to read the Quran. So أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. So even anyone have questions, you can drop it. So if you are not here during this session, you can drop a comment below whenever you have the chance to watch the video. Until then, inshallah, we will meet next week, inshallah, for another edition of our live session, inshallah. The poster is going to be out very soon about how the kids can, how to help kids retain previous lessons, So what we discussed today is how to help kids overcome lack of motivation. So inshallah, tomorrow, next week, we shall be discussing how to help kids retain previously learned Arabic reading skills. A lot of people forget how to read the Quran. Maybe they've been learning it before, but they just forget about it, right? So how do you help people retain whatever they've learned in their previous Quran classes or lessons, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.